The Vikings, fearsome warriors, legendary explorers, and ruthless conquerors. We often imagine them raiding villages, wielding axes, and sailing the seas in their longships. But beneath their glorified image lies a darker, more brutal reality. Here are 10 shocking facts about Viking conquests you probably didn't know. Fact 1. Ruthless raids on monasteries. The Vikings were relentless raiders, and their attacks on monasteries were especially brutal. Wealthy monasteries in Britain and Ireland, filled with treasures, were often defenseless. The Vikings would storm in, massacre the monks, and seize anything valuable: gold, silver, and even manuscripts. These raids devastated religious communities, erasing centuries of culture and history in a single day. To the Vikings, monasteries were easy targets, rich and utterly vulnerable. Fact 2. Slave trade was big business. Beyond raiding for riches, the Vikings built a massive trade network selling slaves. They captured men, women, and children from villages and battlefields, often selling them in slave markets across Europe and the Middle East. Enslaved people were forced into grueling labor or sold to distant lands, where they'd likely never see their home again. This brutal enterprise fueled Viking expansion and enriched them, creating a legacy of suffering that's often overlooked. Fact 3. Ritual sacrifices for the gods. The Vikings believed in appeasing their gods through ritual sacrifices, often involving prisoners of war. Captured enemies were sometimes offered to Odin or Thor through gruesome sacrificial ceremonies. In what's known as the blood eagle, victims had their ribs cut open and lungs pulled out, forming wings in tribute to Odin. These chilling rites were performed to ensure victory, favorable weather, or safe passage at sea. Fact 4. Longships enabled swift, surprise attacks. Viking longships were designed for speed and stealth, allowing raiders to strike before defenders could prepare. These ships could navigate rivers and shallow waters, reaching deep into the heart of foreign lands. Villages were often ambushed with no warning, and Viking warriors would strike swiftly, taking what they wanted and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. This terrifying efficiency made Vikings almost unstoppable. Fact 5. They targeted children and the elderly. When Vikings raided villages, they didn't spare the elderly, women, or children. Vulnerable populations often faced the worst of Viking violence. Children were frequently captured and sold into slavery, while the elderly were slaughtered to prevent resistance. These ruthless actions spread fear across Europe, cementing the Viking reputation as merciless conquerors. Fact 6. The Danelaw and total control over England. The Viking presence in England became so strong that they controlled a large portion of it, known as the Danelaw. In these territories, Viking laws and customs replaced local ones, and settlers imposed a brutal rule over the English inhabitants. Towns like York were turned into Viking strongholds, with locals subjected to harsh taxation and control. The Viking rule over Danelaw left a lasting impact on English culture and society. Fact 7. Destruction of entire cultures. In Ireland and Scotland, Viking conquests destroyed entire cultural sites and artifacts. Celtic artworks, religious symbols, and sacred sites were either looted or desecrated. The Vikings showed little respect for local customs, and were known to burn down villages and places of worship, often wiping out centuries-old cultures. These invasions had a lasting effect, erasing significant parts of history from Ireland, Scotland, and the surrounding isles. Fact 8. Viking settlements were brutal hierarchies. Life in a Viking settlement wasn't easy, especially for those at the bottom of their social structure. Viking societies were hierarchical, with enslaved people and poorer classes often facing harsh conditions. These settlements functioned with strict rules and ruthless enforcement. Even fellow Vikings could be subject to brutal punishment, including exile or death, for disobeying the leadership. Fact 9. They left regions impoverished for decades. The aftermath of Viking raids left entire regions impoverished and struggling to rebuild. Beyond stolen riches, they decimated crops, destroyed villages, and slaughtered livestock, leaving little for the survivors. Regions hit by multiple Viking raids, especially in England and France, suffered long-term economic damage, with some communities never fully recovering. The Vikings' raids had a brutal legacy that lasted far beyond their conquests. Fact 10. Psychological warfare. The Vikings used terror as a weapon, often employing tactics designed to instill fear in their enemies before a battle even began. Their brutal reputation, combined with horrific acts like the Blood Eagle, spread terror across Europe. This psychological warfare often caused people to flee in fear, making it easier for the Vikings to conquer lands with minimal resistance. This tactic proved as effective as their physical might, cementing the Viking image as fearsome, brutal conquerors. The Vikings may have built a powerful legacy, But the truth behind their conquest is dark and brutal. From ritual sacrifices to ruthless raids, the Vikings brought fear and destruction across Europe. Their story is one of relentless conquest, leaving behind scars that would shape history forever.